Welcome back. Good evening, everyone, to The Doctor Will See You Now. If you are familiar now with our format as we're going forward through the months, heading towards next May, when hopefully we can host Newcastle Noir just as we like it, all together, or maybe even blended all together and going live out to the world. We'll see. Plans afoot. But as you know, if you've been watching, these next weeks are dedicated to people who should have appeared at the festival and who might not have appeared in the online events that we've done. And especially if those authors have got a book that's just come out or a book that is just due out, because we really think it's important to make that noise that of course would have been made if the authors could have been out and about on their book tours, coming to meet you and talk about their work. So that's what we feel that we can be doing, over the next few weeks and months until hopefully we can be back to normal. So this evening's pleasure is to welcome Eve Smith into the surgery. Good evening, Eve. Welcome.
Hi, Jackie. Great to be here.
It's lovely to see you. We are here this evening to talk about, I have a copy too, so I'm going to hold my copy up.
Ooh.
Hopefully it'll be all right. Yes, there we go.
Oh,
Eve Smith,
lovely.
The Waiting Rooms. Look at that. That's yours, Eve. You did that.
It's so exciting.
And as you know, this is always recorded before the day of release. But when you're watching it, the book will be released that day, which is Thursday the 9th.
Yeah, that's right.
The 9th of July. And I know both of us would like to give a plug to where you can get hold of this book. So Eve, do you want to tell listeners in the part of the world where you are, where they can get hold of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Oxfordshire, I'd really like you to support your local bookshops. So mine is Jaffe and Neal in Chipping Norton, and also my lovely Waterstones in Witney and Oxford have been amazing. So that would be great.
That's brilliant. And of course, anybody who's familiar with Newcastle Noir, our book store provider is Forum Books, Helen Stanton and the team out in Corbridge. But of course, great support from Waterstones in both Newcastle and Durham. So, we highly recommend that you source, if you can, that you source the book there. And if not, of course, source it how you can. It's really important. So, The Waiting Rooms, published by Arenda Books. But first of all, before we get to the book, let me tell you a little bit about Eve, in case you're not familiar with her. So the tone with which she writes, it's quite scary, really, or we can call it dystopian. And even there's a lovely bit of menace in there. We could even say the shape of things to come, but maybe part of it is already with us. Anyway, Eve, I want to know, if you'll let us know, why is it this interest that you have with dystopia? Because you don't seem the kind of person who lives on the dark side, shall we say. What is it that drew you to this aspect of literature, of culture, of creativity?
Well, I have to say I have always been drawn to the dark side, even from a young age. And I grew up on the Tales of the Unexpected with Roald Dahl. My sister and I used to freak each other out watching that. And I particularly loved the Hammer House of Horror late night double bills. So I used to stay up illegally in my sister's bedroom watching it on the black and white portable. You remember those things?
Oh, yes.
Snowy screens. So I loved all of that. And then when it moved into literature, I used to love Stephen King. And then I discovered Margaret Atwood, the Queen. And I just, ever since then, I love that sort of slightly offbeat, but closer to reality. I find it much more frightening that way. So not totally out there, something that might happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I think, you mentioned Margaret Atwood, and I'm thinking, especially the adaptation last year, and to watch that change in society that could so easily, and some probably would argue that we are witnessing that kind of change anyway. That certainly is scary. I totally agree when it's closer to home and way more credible
Yes.
then
Exactly. I think she calls it, she was interviewed, wasn't she? Because she wrote that in 84. It's hard to believe that it was that long ago. And I love this quote. She talks about it not being a prediction. She said, let's say it's an anti-prediction. Perhaps if we go into it, it may not happen, but we can't rely on that wishful thinking either. And I just thought she's nailed that one, an anti-prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I would, if you'll allow me, you know, I think we could definitely add your book, The Waiting Rooms, to, you know, to that, you know, I'm going to say to that subgenre of the anti-prediction. That could
yes, let's seriously hope it doesn't happen. But yes, so far it's not looking hopeful, is it?
It really isn't. It really isn't. There's a question that I want to ask you about your past as well, because I feel that we are kindred spirits on this. And when I've met and talked to you before, we haven't even discussed this. But to read that you are a modern languages graduate from Oxford, it just thrills the doctor's soul.
Oh, so you're a linguist, Jackie, as well.
Yes, I'm usually a bit naughty and say that I'm a cunning linguist, but yes, I am. Yeah,
very specialised.
Indeed. No, from my undergrad days, I did Scandinavian studies, and then I used to teach Spanish studies. So yeah,
wow.
Languages are my passion. If you'd met me before crime fiction days, you would have found me banging a drum about languages. So what did you study? What languages did you study?
Well, I did French and German, which I did absolutely love, but I have to say Spanish I think would have been a wee bit more useful. So I'm slightly envious. And in fact, my daughters, not that I've made them choose it, but they're both choosing languages as well, and they're both choosing Spanish, which I think is fantastic. So yeah.
You are wonderful, because I think, the whole thing of a language, which then means a culture, and a people's way of thinking and getting into that, I think it just makes literally a world of difference, how we look at things.
Definitely.
So thank you. We've never spoken about that.
No.
And yeah, beautiful. But to write crime fiction now, again, we'll talk a little bit more about other things that you've done in your life, but it doesn't strike me from what I've been reading about you that that you thought way back, I'm going to write crime fiction, or did you? And it's just taken you a while to get to this point?
No, I didn't. I loved writing when I was young, when I was a little. And then I kind of hit the whole job thing after university, and sort of, had my corporate phase, very serious, climbing the ladder. And then I got completely disillusioned after I joined a large consultancy and took a year out and realized actually my passion was around nature and conservation, which it still is, actually. So when I came back, I sent off CV and I got a job working for this environmental research organization, which I loved. And I worked there for about 13 years. But I'm a big believer in changing and sort of, I don't think we should be fixed in what we do all the time. And I say that a lot to my daughters. They're probably bored of me banging on about it. But I took a pause from the environmental organization for various reasons. It had sort of crunched in with having young children. And I went on a creative writing course because I thought I wanted to do something completely different. And I just loved it. I remembered how much I loved writing. And I had an amazing tutor, this guy, Alan Pollock, who's a local playwright, was running the group. It was a really good group as well, real mix of people. And I just loved it. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. That's what I'm going to do, completely naively. Had no idea about the process and how long it would take and how I was utterly an imbecile to think that, I'll just churn out a novel in a year. But once I commit. And I set my sights on it. I remembered, I just got the bug again. And that was when I made the decision that I was going to try and make that my next career, I guess. So yeah, that's how I came to it. And it had to be the dark stuff because that's what I've grown up with.
So the writing course that you went on, is it local to where you are now?
Yeah, and it's not even a course. It was literally a creative writing group. It was run out of Chipping Norton. There's really supportive stuff happening out of there through the theatre. And there's also a festival there, Chip Lit Fest. And it was literally just a group of people that turned up on a Monday, shared a bit of work. I was steered by Alan. And it was very informal, like there was no formal writing tuition at all, apart from sort of Alan's wisdom, as it were. We weren't running a course, but it was absolutely fantastic. It's a really good way to get into writing. So I always recommend people do that if they're starting out.
I really enjoy that you share that, because I think, you know, to say there's a fixed way to do something, no, there isn't. And how it opens, you know, different ways open the door for people.
Definitely.
You know, to be able to come to that point. I know you joked a little bit earlier about that. I thought I could just, but I think the dreams are really important, to think I can do that, and then to have that vehicle, you know, having been with that group and allowing you to do that.
Yes.
So the waiting rooms, did it sort of with the initial ideas teased out then when you were part of this group?
Yes, I did. So I had some initial ideas on that, and what we would do, we'd each read a segment. So I spoke to Alan, because it wasn't quite what the group was set up for, to write a novel, because it was ideally you were practicing different styles of writing. But I'd been a member for a while now, and I tried out other stuff, and I just said to him, is it okay if I just bring in different scenes? And he was totally cool with that. So yes, it's quite funny, because I just wrote out to all of my fellow chippy writers last week to say, it's finally happening. The book is out next week.
Yes.
And I wrote them in the acknowledgements. So I sent them a picture of that, because they're not all dystopian fans. So I wasn't expecting them to rush out and buy it. And they will have heard some of those scenes, that absolutely some of those original scenes were written for that group. And, you know, I took on board the feedback, and, you know, you learn something from every single person. There was a real mix of people. There were poets, there were other, you know, thriller writers, there were comedy people. That I really believe you learn something every time. That's why I love the noir at the bar. I love listening to the authors, because every time you hear somebody read, you just think, oh, really like what they did there. Maybe I should rethink this or this. So
yeah, because it's that idea, isn't it, that, you know, we have a way of working, we have a way of thinking.
Yeah.
But you catch maybe the way somebody describes something, or the sentence structure, or anything like that, and you just think, maybe I could give that a try. It might work.
Yes.
And just unlock something else.
Yeah.
So the waiting rooms. I love that it's described as a thought-provoking mystery set in a dysfunctional world. So I wonder, would you do us the honours of just giving us, without no spoilers, but could you give us a brief synopsis to start off with? What's the book about?
So the book is set in the advent and aftermath of an antibiotic crisis, and decades of spiraling resistance have led to this point. And what we have is we have three female leads, and we see their lives and how it's been impacted by the crisis beforehand, all the stuff that's building up and leading to that point. And then importantly, 20 years after, and we meet Kate, who's the sort of lead protagonist 20 years later, in a world where no one over 70 gets access to new drugs, because resistance has grown to such a point that any new antibiotics are extremely precious. They're also not going to last very long, so they're reserved. And society has to make a choice that if drugs are limited, who gets them? And so in this world, the elderly do not have access to the drugs, and therefore they are left to fight their infections on their own, or they can choose to end their lives. It's quite, it's quite heavy, and it is way more heavy in the context that we're living right now. That's been quite difficult, I think, for people to read about a pandemic during a pandemic.
Yeah, you know, when we first started talking, and we're saying how you know, texts that don't stretch reality too far.
Yes.
And when you began writing this, because you know, I've read about the research that you did, and people read the back, and you say, you know, this isn't far away, this notion.
No.
But I presume when you started the waiting rooms, you never thought it would be part of a pandemic.
No, I mean, It's just been unreal. I mean, I think I got the copy of my trade proofs at the end of January, which was just when everything was beginning to hit, and the World Health Organization were convening meetings. And then, you know, we get to mid-March and the whole world's in lockdown. So it was bizarre because a lot of the scenes I'd written started to become real. You know, people going out with masks, obsessive hygiene, wearing gloves, disinfectant, quarantine, you know, stockpiling, rationing food. All of these things were things that I'd thought about, you know, how would a world be if all of a sudden we do not have control over infection? What are all of the precautions that everybody's going to have to take, and what are the different choices? And of course, we've already had to make some of those, and there are some really tough choices.
Indeed, indeed. And I would be really keen to see, you know, what people say about reading a text like this in the times that we're living in. You know, because I don't know, that the desire to escape with something different, or maybe, you know, because it's almost palpable.
Yes.
Then it's, you know, it's a text to be in. I mean, and for myself, you know, going through it and doing those comparisons, I don't wish to sound, you know, a bit crazy, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You know, to see how things are dealt with, and how things are being dealt with, as you know, in real life.
Yeah, well, I've seen that in some of the reviews, and the bloggers, who I have to say, major shout out to the bloggers. They've been incredible.
Wonderful.
Really are. And a lot of people think they get paid, and which of course they do not. They squeeze it in on top of the day job. So yeah, and it's been quite interesting reading them and some of the feedback from early readers of the ebook. They've said that, so obviously it takes a certain kind of person to jump in, you know, both feet into this kind of fiction during a pandemic. But actually, whilst it made it, I think, much more real and therefore more frightening, the fact that the characters find their way through it, albeit with sacrifices along the way, but the characters find their path. I think a number of people said it actually gave them hope.
Indeed.
That we can adapt even to the worst situations and come out with humanity.
Yeah, because I totally agree with you. I think, you know, here we are, you know, nationally and globally, needing to find a way forward. And the fact that, again, without giving things too much away, that, you know, these protagonists do find a way forward, you know.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned about Kate, but we have Mary and Lily as well. And I was struck by that predominance of female voices, and a very welcome predominance. I don't mean that in a negative way at all. And I just wondered why you felt, you know, that drive to present us with these characters, and you know, for there to be a very clear female, you know, multiple voice coming out from the pages. What choice? Why did that choice come about?
Well, I think when you're dealing with these big, frightening issues, I think it's much more impactful if you bring it down to a family human drama. And so I wanted to write a human drama to illustrate just how these big things can take effect, because we don't really listen. You know, this is the problem when the government tries to tell you, you know, oh, we'll be careful about antibiotic resistance, and we get numbers thrown at us. They're kind of meaningless in a way, because, well, it's not me. But actually, if you read a story about a family that's been ripped apart by a particular scenario, then you're much more likely to take notice. And I was very interested in the family dynamic, and being a mum myself, to two daughters, with all the wonders of the challenges, I like getting under the skin of that. And what is it like to be a mother in an environment where you are fearful at every turn for your children in a world that's full of infection risk? What's that like? And then also to explore the relationship between older women and their mothers as well. I think that's another really interesting one, and sort of how love translates over the generations. And then I really wanted to have a strong older female lead. And I know you've asked me about this, Jackie, because I don't feel you get a lot of that in fiction, particularly in thriller and dark fiction. And I really feel I just really wanted to put try and create a character that is true to life, which is, older people have got amazing histories. You walk past somebody in the street, you've got no idea what they've done in their life, and everyone's done something amazing at least once. And I wanted to have this character who might be frail on the outside, but is sharp as a pin and has got this incredible history that we begin to unravel. And again, the idea of older people having loved so strongly. You look at this older lady and you don't think about how passionate she was and perhaps still is, and of these loves that they've had. And I really wanted to get into that, because I think that's an underexplored area, and I thought it had huge potential.
Without a doubt, I wholly echo and endorse what you say, because I think the desire and the need to read self as well. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love organized crime stories. I love serial killers and thrillers and spy things. But, at present, none of that is my experience.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you say, the family dynamic and moving into a certain part of life now, the heavens willing, to see, those experiences described on the page, those emotions to spill out on the page. It was a joy, to be in that moment. It really was. So I'm going to give you a little tricky thing here. See if we can do it. So if we take Kate, Mary, and Lily,
yes,
could you just give me sort of like a brief description? What is it that you like about each one of these women?
Okay. Well, I'll start with Lily, who is the older character, the older lady character in the book, who is in a retirement facility, a care home, basically. And I love her because she's got such a huge will and determination, that despite all of the obstacles in her way, both physical and literally somebody is after her, she is able to keep going and to really have this desire to survive, real vitality to her. So that's what I love about Lily. Then Kate, who is my mother, who's the nurse in the waiting rooms. I love Kate because she is doing a god-awful job that no one else wants to do. And she could do a different kind of job. She could be a normal kind of nurse in a normal hospital, but she's chosen to work in the waiting rooms because she knows how important it is. And she wrestles with all of the ethics of what she does day in, day out. But again, she has this belief that what she wants to do is to look after people, and she stays true to that despite all of the horrendous obstacles and abuse that she gets, actually. So I love Kate for that. And then Mary, I want to be Mary. I want to go to South Africa, meet a lovely ranger. Mary is a passionate woman. I love her passion, and she's a little naive and doesn't make the best choices perhaps, but she's this passionate woman with an appetite for life, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that, again, for people who are watching, I invite you to get hold of this book and get better acquainted with these three characters. There is a fourth character, though, that we really should. You mentioned South Africa, and of course, it's there, larger than life, writ on the pages of the waiting rooms.
Yeah.
I read that you've been involved in projects in Asia and Africa, and in the Americas.
Yeah.
So you could have chosen any of those other places that, you know, where you've worked or been involved in projects going on there. What does Africa mean to you?
Oh, I just love Africa. I'll be honest, my husband and I have just got this fantasy that at one point we're going to be able to spend 3 months a year in South Africa in the middle of a game park going round. Yeah, I love South Africa, and I've been very fortunate not only to go with work, but also with the family. And as I said, I'm a real nature lover, and I worked in conservation, and we took the family out there. I've taken the girls out there several times now, and it is a magical place, and particularly Kruger National Park, which is what I base the park on in the book. It is like going back in time. You go to a place that is untouched by industry. It is an amazing expanse. I think it's the size of Wales, and you can encounter wildlife at any point by yourself, because you can self-drive, and you literally go off an adventure every day. And it is such a stunning country. I mean, it has issues like, well, don't we have issues as well? But it is a true, it's a remarkable place, and a tribute to South Africa that they have managed to preserve such a vast area, and they fight every day to keep the animals safe. So yeah, it means a lot to me, that place.
And again, without giving too much away or anything like that, why does this amazing geographical location, why is it part of the story?
Oh, well, a key part of the plot is that pre-crisis, Mary is looking for, they're basically trying to find a cure for resistant infections. So I wanted to choose a place that has huge diversity, and I actually researched this. A lot of the stuff in pre-crisis, actually, it did all happen. So I needed a place where there was a large amount of plant diversity, which is being used and investigated to make drugs, which it is. And I also needed a place where there was effectively a pandemic in process, which there was. And TB is the disease which was rife not just in South Africa, but actually worldwide. And so South Africa was a great location in terms of plot, but it also formed an amazing backdrop for a love story. And I love writing about nature, and I love writing about the landscape, and the park is just an incredible backdrop for that. So yeah, that's why I chose South Africa.
It's gorgeous, and really, you know, again, readers, viewers, if you like to travel when you read, it's beautiful. You don't need to worry about airplanes, passports, anything like that. But you really get a sense, and the animals and plant life that Eve, you describe so beautifully.
Thank you.
I really think, you know, it's like it's more than it's almost like buy one book and get another one free as part of it. It's that sense to it. But just to come back, and it's something, if there was anything that troubled me, or not troubled, but I always think a good crime, a good mystery story brings us things to contemplate.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the whole notion around ageism and a health service in crisis.
Yes, absolutely.
Not fiction at all.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, thinking globally, there are certain cultures, of course, that don't have the same attitude towards the elderly that sadly I think we do in many respects in the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, did you ever struggle? I mean, because it's so hard hitting. Did you struggle? I mean, did you find yourself weeping when you were writing certain bits of this?
I did have a little cry every now and again, and particularly actually because, as you'll know, you kind of have so many edits and you're on the computer. When I first got the trade proof, I read it, you know, first page to last as a book for the first time, because I always read books in physical format, because I like, work is laptop, reading pleasure is a physical book.
Yeah.
And I cried at the end of the first chapter. And lots of people have told me they had a weep at the end of the first chapter, men and women, I'm pleased to say.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
So yes, I did. And I did write some challenging scenes. And I wanted to do that because I think the issues are very important. And yeah, I've seen my share of death, and I have lost people I've loved, and it is, I wanted to do justice to that, because it is hard to write about grief sometimes, or to really try and capture an emotion. And I did want to do that, and it is an abhorrent concept, what I've put in the book, but I am being deliberately provocative because I care so much about it. And part of the research I did, not just into the antibiotic resistance for the waiting rooms, I also found out a lot of very troubling research, on your point, Jackie, about ageism. And there was research done, which was a European piece of research, that showed that ageism was the most commonly experienced form of prejudice. And then I went further later on, because the great thing about the whole publishing process taking so long is that you can update your research the whole time. So on my website, I do update the research as new things come in, because I'm monitoring it. And then I found out there'd been a global piece of research done on ageism, and it isn't just limited to the West at all. But it's almost they described it as a subconscious bias that people, if you'd said to somebody, are you ageist? Of course, they'd say no. But through their questioning, they teased out that people just had these stereotypes of, feeble, frail, all of these other adjectives that they were applying, not thinking that in any way it was a prejudice, but that it was obviously it was. And that it's a big issue that we need to tackle, particularly given that the global population is aging, and we're not dealing with that very well now. So, yeah, it's a big one. It's as I say, the perfect storm when you crunch those two issues together, which I think we really are going to have to learn to deal with a lot better.
Better than we do. I totally agree with you. And again, the whole notion of a health service that is not looked after as it could or should be. Where and I think for me, and it's something that I hold very dear. It's the idea of we seem to be able to find funding for lots of other things. So it's not that there's a lack of funding, but to me it speaks of a lack of a wherewithal to do so.
Yes, well, if there's one thing that I hope comes out of this pandemic, it will be to address that, because it's a shame. In fact, funny enough, I think there's a line like this in the book. It's a shame that it takes a global health emergency to spur Westminster into action, but I think it really does. It really must now.
It must without a doubt. It really must. Now I am getting aware of time, and it's never on our side in the surgery. Just like when you go and see the doctor, it's thinking, who's next? Is there anything else you'd like to know? Because I've got lots of things that I want to ask you about. The style of the novel, having those different women's stories and them being interwoven like they are.
Yes.
When you set off on your journey with this book, did you write in parallel the three strands, or did you write each woman's story and then weave it together like a tapestry?
Yes, the latter, actually. I tend to write sequentially. So I always had the pre and the post. That was always in my mind. And then actually, Harry, my agent, said, Eve, I want more of the crisis itself, which actually Karen, my publisher, also said. So I actually wrote some extra chapters. So I ended up almost having 3 timelines on the build up to the crisis, post-crisis, and then the crisis itself. And I'd originally veered away from that because I did not want to write a sort of an another apocalypse, like everybody's dead and, here we are. Because frankly, that's been done and been done very well as well. I wanted to write, I'm more interested in the so what. As a result of this, what has changed? What are the difficult choices? So yeah, so I ended up, I'm total planner. I'm a total nerd. I mean, hats off to the pantsers. I absolutely cannot do that because I can't remember what happened about 5 minutes ago. So I write everything down, and so I have a framework, and then I tend to write in one character for a while, and then afterwards I piece it all in because I know where I want my chapters to go, and I end up moving them around loads as well. I cut and paste chapters all the time, so without a framework you've had it. So yes, because I remember I asked Callie Taylor. I went to one of her sessions at Chiplet Fest. She's so lovely, and she said to me, she said, "No, I've done a dual timeline." She goes, "Just write one and then write your other one, and then you can chop them in." So I've got her to thank for that advice.
Yeah, her advice works beautifully, by the way. So that's so that is great. Shout out to Callie there. I like that. It always seems a really bad thing to ask when a book is just out, and here we are celebrating that, and the fact that it's a debut as well, because it's just like, go girl. Of course, the problem is after the debut has to come the next one.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
And so, without wishing to put too much pressure, because it's we're just celebration at the minute, are you into book 2? And if you are, can you just give us a few breadcrumbs of what delights await us?
Well, yes, I am firmly into book 2. I'm probably about halfway through my sort of draft, my first draft, and for me, it's always going to be find the issue and then think about the human drama. So it will be another big issue, and I think I can say what the issue is because I don't think that's too many spoilers. So my next territory is genetics. I'm very interested. Gene editing is a big one, and so yes, I have another intense family scenario, loads of ethical quandaries and some fairly dubious practices going on, which I'm right in the middle of now. So yeah, I'm going full steam ahead.
Excellent. Honestly, again, we shouldn't wish life away, but that sounds fabulous, and I can't wait to get hold of it. Now, so before we wrap up, and as I say, I'm really sorry because I could talk all night about this.
No, this is great fun.
Yes, and we should have a glass of wine and things like that. But the great people at Arenda, Karen and the team have kindly said that we can do a little competition, and it's a dead simple competition. All you have to do to win a copy of The Waiting Rooms, matching, yes, she's got one too.
Karen will tell me off if I don't do that.
She will. That's why I had one, because I don't want to get told off. See, all you need to do is email competitions@arendabooks.co.uk. That's competitions@arendabooks.co.uk, and they'll pick one of the names out of the hat of people that write in. But please do come on, because competitions it's always worth having a go. You've got nothing to lose and a fab book to win.
Absolutely.
So, Eve Smith, it has been a total pleasure and delight to be in your company this evening.
Oh, thank you. It's been wonderful, Jackie, to be here. Thank you.
And as I always say, I look forward to when we can do this in real life.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it will be, that will be it'll be magical. And I believe it will happen. But I would like to wish you all the very best with the Waiting Rooms. I believe it will leave, a very significant mark, certainly within the notion of crime fiction, and beyond.
Thank you. I hope you're right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you nailed it with this. And just stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Yeah.
Yes, you too. You too.
Right.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and everyone for listening.
It's a pleasure. Good night for now.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.